Just thank you for all coming out tonight. Turned out to be a nice evening, so I'm glad everybody took the time. There's a lot of important information to get out. Our agenda, and there were some copies out there, so hopefully everybody has one. We'll hear from Senator Guile on an update of the session and what was important in her agenda this past year and what's going forward over the summer and moving forward in the state. We'll also get an update from Delegate Bagnall on those same issues or similar issues, other issues she has. And then we'll hear from Councilwoman Fiedler, and she will provide us, there's some important legislation at the County Council in regarding to Plan 2040 zoning, and in specific, our Region 4 and everything that's happening, upzoning and changes. And she'll go over the tool that is available through the website so that we all can make our comments as necessary and participate in the process, because this only happens about every 10 years. And this is the chance to be heard about what properties that are proposed to change, and that will shape what the Broadneck Peninsula looks in 2040 and beyond. I would like to just take a moment to recognize any members of the Broadneck Council that are here. They do important volunteer work throughout the year, working with both state and local officials on a number of issues. If you're, we have John Joins here. He's down in the Pleasant Plains area. Britt Griswold serves as our tech guy, but also is over in Amberley in the St. Margaret's area. Who else do we have here tonight? Peter Bradley. He's in the Whitehall area. Whitehall Manor, correct? The Barbara Hitchings, she's down in the Sandy Point area. And anybody else? Pat Lynch, obviously here. Amberley, all of Broadneck, Severna Park. So, any other members? I didn't see. I know Phil was out of town. Okay. And then I just wanted to take a moment. Is there anybody running for public office that just wants to be recognized while they're here to start the meeting? Anybody running for public office since we have an option? Latoya, you're there in the back. So.
Latoya can go up to apply for the administration candidate.
Okay, thank you. Because I believe it's next week that elections and
May 14th, I was
May 14th is the elections, but the primary or the early voting starts, and the Broadneck Library, and we'll talk about that, but is one of the key spots you can drop things off now. So, but. No further ado, Senator Guile, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bo, for the invitation, and Pat, thanks for everyone coming out, too. It's really important to have engaged constituents and people that are interested in hearing about the work that we do in Annapolis. So, as you know, I'm Senator Dawn Guile. I represent District 33 in the Maryland Senate. We just got done with session. I say just, but I guess at this point now, it's been a couple weeks. I got my laundry all caught up and saw my kids again, thank goodness. But we got a lot done this session. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the priorities of the General Assembly as a whole that got done this session, and then also talk to you a little bit about some of the priorities that I worked on this session as well. As in addition to that, some of the funding. In the General Assembly, we do not only legislative bills like policy type issues, and we're also to advocate for dollars, money to our district by way of capital money. So first, I want to talk to you about some of the legislation that I sponsored. Did a lot of bills this session. I think I'll maybe take a little bit of a rest next session because it was a very busy session for me. I ended up passing 20 bills this session. It was a significant amount of work. And I also serve as the chair of the Anne Arundel County Senate delegation. Delegate Bagnall here serves as the chair of the Anne Arundel County House delegation. So on top of the bills that I sponsored as a primary sponsor, I also sponsored a number of bills for the Anne Arundel County delegation. One of the top bills that I worked on this session was a comprehensive online data privacy bill. On the way over here, I was just listening to Car on the News on NPR. We're talking about, you may have heard the story because it just came out about GM selling your data, your driving data, back to LexisNexis as well as insurance companies, and insurance companies making decisions about your insurance rates based on really spying on you and how you're driving. And now you probably signed up for it in the course of buying or leasing your vehicle, but oftentimes it's when the fine print and you may not know what's going on. There's also a number of other examples of kind of creepy things when you go online to shop, and then ended up, having those ads that kind of follow you all around the internet. That just feels creepy. And then there's other things that are just downright disturbing. For another example, is one website where people could go. It's called pray.com, which seems like a great concept where you could go and you could type in and express some of the things that you're dealing with and ask others to pray for you. This information, people having marital issues, gambling addiction, were later getting targeted by ads for marital counseling, for gambling addiction counseling, things like that. So it was really important. Some of you may be aware, if you're aware of privacy laws, the GDPR exists in Europe. That's a comprehensive privacy law that exists in Europe. The United States does not have a federal law related to data privacy. And it's something that I think more and more people, especially as you're online more, it's great that you can use your biometric data, your face, your fingerprint, to help you use apps, right? Or to access your banking account, things like that. It helps with the user experience. On the other hand, those examples that I gave, there's numerous more that are just frankly disturbing. And so it was important. A number of other states so far, 14 at the beginning of the session, I think now we're up to 16, that have enacted data privacy. And a lot of them follow a similar model. I'm really proud that the law that we were able to pass, the bill that we were able to pass here this session, was a really strong data privacy that will really do well to protect consumer data. And that was just, I can't even begin to tell you how much work this involved, just because data privacy covers every type of industry, whether it be insurance, whether it be big tech companies from Google, Verizon, and others. So we met with every big tech company, as well as every public and private sector, on getting a good balanced bill that will protect consumer data, but also balance a little bit with some of the industry concerns as well. So that was one of the important bills that we passed this session. In addition, another big consumer protection bill that I was proud to work on. Anybody had heard the news about like Taylor Swift shows or Bruce Springsteen, those like outrageous ticket prices? On top of that, those frustrations that people have complained about when you go to online to buy a ticket and you get to that very last page and all of a sudden there's all these fees that you didn't know about. Those were some of the issues that we were trying to address by this bill that I brought this session. And then I just want to give a quick mention to my legislative director, Spencer, is back here, and he helped a considerable amount on getting this bill done. On top of that, we worked with different venues like Merriweather Post Pavilion. We also heard from Maryland Hall during the holidays. The Nutcracker was going on there, and they were getting reports back from grandparents that just want to take their grandkids to the Nutcracker. And they were getting, they were looking online, and these tickets were being sold for like $300. When you can go directly to the site, and you get the tickets there for like $20, $25, something like that, whatever it was. And one of the problems with that, and the reasons why they're able to do that and sell that, other companies are able to do that, including things like StubHub and others, and other just ticket brokers are able to do that. It's for one, some things called like deceptive URLs that they're able to mimic that website. But there also, what we learned is there's something called speculative tickets. And that's something that you can sell something you don't even have. For example, we heard from Merriweather that they announced a show on a Wednesday. Those tickets will go on sale on a Friday because they want people to get some time, if they want to get a babysitter lined up, things like that. And during that time period, there will be ticket sellers on the secondary ticket markets selling those tickets already, even though they haven't even gone on sale from the primary market. And so they're able to, they kind of hedge their bets that they're going to be able to buy those tickets later in a couple days when they do go on sale. And it drives up, this sense of urgency, thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss the show that I really want to see. And so they don't have that opportunity to get those tickets. So we banned speculative tickets, required greater transparency in ticket prices. Also, working with the Office of the Attorney General to do a study on the ticket market as a whole, and to see if there's other things we could do to either possibly put a cap on the cost of the tickets on the secondary market. So those were two of the top consumer protection bills. I also did a bill that I was really proud to work on related to school safety. And I think, unfortunately, tragically, we've been hearing so much about the awful school shootings. And in particular, concerns. I was just recently at Arundel High School this morning. I've been recently also at Meade High School. Schools are huge, all right? If there was an active shooter, let's say in the library, it's called in and says, they're to first responders that there's a school shooter, that there's a shooter there. It's really difficult for those first responders to be able to locate where is the library in these massive schools. And so we worked with, there's some great vendors that have developed and it's been implemented in other states. It's called mapping, where they're able to put it on these schools on sort of a grid. If you ever played Battleship, that you're able to quickly locate as opposed to saying, oh gosh, where's the library? That they have it on this grid system that way they can quickly identify where that threat is and be able to respond to it very quickly. I also worked on, I think if you know anything about me, you know that I work on a lot of veteran and military family issues. My husband's retired Army. Served 24 years in the Army, and obviously here in my district, being situated between Fort Meade and Naval Academy, Coast Guard Yard, and also the Military District of Washington, that we have a lot of veterans and military families here in this district. So I worked with the Secretary of Veteran Affairs during the interim to talk about what can we do to make Maryland a more military-friendly state. And we developed this commission that is going to examine what ways to make it a more military-friendly state. Also changing the name to the Department of Veteran Affairs to the Department of Veteran and Military Families. The VA, their mission here in the state of Maryland has always been also a focus on military families as part of their overall mission, but just haven't really done a lot in that area. And so it would also appoint a deputy secretary for military families. And so the hope is that there could be more work done in that department to better address the needs of military families, whether it be military spouse employment, whether it be military kids moving here and be able to get their records and ease that transition more. So I was very excited to work on that. The governor, one of his top priorities this year was focusing on military families, and so I worked closely with the governor on that. I won't go through all the details of all the various military-related bills that I did, but there are quite a few. So ideas for bills, a lot of times people ask me, where do these come from? A lot of them come from stakeholders, advocacy groups, nonprofits. Other times they come from constituents. And we hear from constituents saying, this has been a really frustrating issue for me. I'll give you one example as we're talking about veterans and military families. An individual, I'm pretty sure I'm not sure if he's in Cape St. Clair area, but he's, I think, on the Broad Neck Peninsula. An individual named Roy Tucker, he reached out to me and said, I am a disabled veteran. He's 100% non-permanent disabled veteran. He served in Vietnam, has cancer attributable to exposure to Agent Orange. And we have disabled veterans, 100% disabled, permanent, don't pay property taxes, right? And then below that, there are various degrees of property tax exemption based on what your disability is. However, there's a gap. If you are 100% permanent, you get no property taxes. Things below that, it can be either or, permanent or non-permanent. If you are 100% non-permanent, which he was with his cancer diagnosis, nothing, absolutely nothing. And so we worked in order to fix that. And so now he's able to avail himself of this property tax exemption during the time of his disability status. Another example was an issue related to boating safety. as we know, being here, and I hope I'm not talking too much. Okay.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, holler at me, pull the hook once I'm going for
You're
too
good.
long. Another example, like here where we are, obviously being, on the Cape, we got Magathie, we got the Severn River. A lot of people spend a lot of time boating, but we've heard a lot recently about some pretty tragic incidents on the water. And, frankly, a lot of people making what I tell my kids sad choices while being out on the water. One particular example was a young man from Crofton, 21 years old, I believe. He was a student at Anne Arundel Community College and died in a boating accident in which the operator of the boat was drunk and high. And just absolutely awful. And his mother was just so upset and reached out to my office about what can we do, to strengthen our boating safety laws and also impose greater penalties, including taking away that boating privileges from folks that are boating while intoxicated. And so the bill that we passed this session would develop a database within DNR. If you get a DUI, you could lose your driver's license. Everyone knows that. There's no analogous boating license, right? You have like a boating, whatever, safety card, whatever they call it for you to operate a vessel. And so if you get a BUI is what it's called, right now a court can order you and say you can't operate a vessel. The problem is that order, all it does is stay at the courthouse. This way that would go to DNR and DNR can enforce it and say like that you can, if it catches you, you're off. Also, we increased what the penalties would be for boating while intoxicated. So it was it was a very emotional day doing that bill with Mrs. Barton, and I was happy to get that one passed for her. Some of the other top bills that we worked on generally as the General Assembly, I think Delegate Bagnall will go some of the other ones too. The Port Act was one significant bill. Obviously, we had to act very quickly. It was honestly the timing of the bridge collapse. Nobody would ever want that to occur. But it was actually the fact that we were already in session. We were able to do something about that and enact emergency legislation to do something about that. And specifically worked on the Port Act would ensure all workers currently out of a job and not fully made whole by unemployment insurance would receive the direct benefits. Also provided resources to small businesses to retain their workforces and incentivize entities who use or rely on the port to do business and come back to the Port of Baltimore. So that was a significant bill that we were able to get done at the end of session. Juvenile justice reform. I know there's been a lot of discussion, really, about some concerns about what was enacted previously with the juvenile justice reform and ensuring that there was accountability for minors that do break the law. And I know that there are some concerns that we haven't been as tough as maybe we should have been. We all know kids, we don't want to necessarily say we're going to lock up kids forever, right? If there's kids that are committing crimes, a lot of times there may be issues in the home, issues in the family. We want to make sure that they get the services they need. On the other hand, there needs to be accountability for the crimes that they do commit. So among those changes that we made with the juvenile justice bill is expand the jurisdiction of DJS to include those under the age of 13 for certain firearm-related offenses and third-degree sexual offenses. I know that was a major concern about whether or not those under the age of 13 could be penalized. Requiring a child in need of supervision petition to be filed for a youth accused of committing car theft, and more. I just wanted to mention as well, I have an end of session letter that details a lot of what we did. I won't be able to go through everything, all of the top priorities, as well as all my bills that I worked on. But Spencer has them all back here. I encourage you to grab a letter or send me an email if you have any questions about anything that I've gone over now or anything else that you read about in the letter or really anywhere. One last thing that I do want to just touch upon before I turn it over to Delegate Bagnall is the funding. Delegate Bagnall and I worked on a lot of great capital budget funding here for the district. Among those, Early Heights in Severna Park, but close by, ended up getting $350,000 towards the reconstruction of its building. So that was really important priority. Severna Park Community Center, $125,000 for the pool. $393,000 for Whitehall to repair the roof gutters, downspouts, and other related construction components, and much, much more. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think my time's up now. The hook?
You have a few minutes if you want to take a question.
Yeah.
One thing, let's step back and look at the big picture. I'm looking at a Maryland Matters column.
Sure.
The structural budget deficits.
Uh-huh.
$761 million in 2025, and then out through 2029, $2.7 billion. Hogan left office with a surplus. Now we have a deficit out 5 years. Now I know these numbers will change, but
Sure.
it's pretty. Revenues are not keeping up with spending. So could you talk how you close the gap this year and plan to close it next year?
Sure.
several years,
Yeah, I'll talk a little.
without balancing the budget on the backs of your constituents with taxes and fees,
Sure.
especially since we have a high inflation persistent rate.
Sure. So first, to your point, so obviously when Hogan left office, it's around the time we were receiving a significant amount of federal money in the wake of COVID pandemic funding money. So we did have to deal with a major budget issues. So this was definitely a year of belt tightening, where we had to look at, we lost a significant amount of federal pandemic money. We also know that there's a lot of great investments that we do believe in, things like funding, our fully funding our public schools. That was something that's been a large priority of the General Assembly and of the state of Maryland. And so we have to look at ways of, first of all, tightening the budget of what are the things that, for example, if we had what came to the General Assembly this year with any bill that was going to cost a significant amount of money that had attached to it a significant fiscal note, there was absolutely no way that was going to pass. So there was a lot of things, a lot of priorities that I'm sure a lot of people would want to do this session that we just simply could not do. Secondly, you're absolutely right. We had to look at ways. There was, I'm sure if you were reading the same Maryland Matters, there was a difference of opinion between the chambers on how to address that. The Senate took a different approach than what the House did. There was a compromise that was ultimately reached where there was a taxes increased on cigarettes and vape products, as well as fees for electric vehicles. And part of the reason for the electric vehicles, not only is public education a significant cost on the budget, but on top of that, our transportation fund, specifically, as more and more people are driving electric vehicles and less people are using gas-powered vehicles, there's less source of, they're not paying into the gas tax. Also, similarly, electric vehicles are just inherently heavier than gas-powered vehicles. And so, we had to figure out, well, one, we don't want to necessarily disincentivize people from buying electric vehicles, but on the other hand, we still need to fully fund our transportation fund. So consequently, we added fees, increased fees on registration for electric vehicles. Dr. Bagnall, is there anything else you want to?
Well, I was going to say just a couple things. One is the challenge of the surplus, because part of that surplus was built on under enrolling our entire state government. So we had state agencies that when Hogan left office were anywhere from 10 to 30% understaffed. Mm-hmm. And what we found is that was causing huge inefficiencies, including things like a $500 million calculation error in our Medicaid. So we had to respond to that. We had a $500 million write down. So there was a lot of belt tightening. But the other thing that we did, and I think this is really important because I don't want to make taxes the evil. Because it's about the return on investment and making sure that we're using those state dollars wisely and looking at leveraging state money for federal money, and also ensuring that we're not just kicking the can down the road. So there was a discrepancy between how the House wanted to approach the budget, how the Senate wanted to approach the budget, and we all worked really hard lobbying those chambers and lobbying the governor to not put this off because we didn't want to dig a deeper hole. And one of the things that came out of the consensus, not just was revenue with an increase on the tobacco and vape and looking at EVs, but it was also a commitment to look at a complete overhaul of our tax law and looking at progressive tax law and about our corporate taxes, because we really aren't there was a bill called the Fair Share Act. It didn't pass, but what we got was a commitment to do that hard work, because we can't push it, we can't push it down the road. And I think it's really important to recognize that commitment is giving us the time during the interim to really figure out how to do it right and not do something that would harm our constituents, but also fully funds the priorities that are so meaningful to the people who put us here to do that work.
Now, I don't have anything against, and I support spending more money for schools, but at the same time, you start spending or throwing a lot of money at something, what accountability is there? Are you looking for higher test scores, or is there some kind of metrics that you're saying to the school systems, if we give you X dollars, we expect this?
Do you want to speak to the accountability? There's
There's
actually a commission.
accountability implementation board
Yeah.
that oversees the implementation of the blueprint, that actually looks at those metrics. And as we fund the blueprint and as we fund it over the next several years, that looks at all of those and to see if it's actually being successful. And
not
one of the
waiting
things that
till
we
the
worked
end.
at.
Yeah, but
Right.
looking at those metrics as we implement it now, as we roll it out, so that if there are adjustments that we need to make, and we have, we had to make adjustments. Obviously, with the pandemic, we've had to make adjustments as we saw how this was impacting counties. That we actually have the ability to make adjustments as we roll it out and make sure that we're meeting those metrics.
We're coming up on 7:30. Why don't we hold questions until Heather has a chance to speak, if that's
Oh, sure.
okay, and then we can do some state Q&A at that point in time, because she'll have a number of other bills.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you all for hosting us tonight, and also thank you for giving me such a great partner in the Senate chamber. We've now had 2 years, 2 sessions working together, and it's been an absolute joy. And this year, we were also delegation partners. So I was the chair of the House delegation for a second term. I was honored to be elected unanimously for a second term. So I hope that spoke well to my first term. And Dawn joined me in the Senate chamber. So I was not as ambitious as Senator Guile. I put in 14 bills. I passed 9. 3 of which I actually withdrew because they needed more work, or one I was asked to put in, and I was like, ooh, I didn't realize that's what that did. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the legislation I did and some of the top line legislation, and also some of our non-legislative work that I think is really important to this district. As you know, I like to say that I'm focused on dental, mental, and vision. And this year, I had a number of dental bills. We have really been aggressively looking at dental access. And for a long time, dental health, behavioral health, vision, they were kind of like carved out as though they're not part of your overall well-being. And so though we haven't carved them back into our insurance, we have carved them back into our system of healthcare. So this year, I passed a study. A couple years ago, we actually expanded Medicaid for adult dental for Medicaid. It was huge. It was a huge investment. We've had an incredible response to that, but because a lot of people just simply didn't, they didn't have the resources to deal with their oral health care, and Medicaid covered children, but we didn't cover adults. So following up with what we did with the adult dental, one of the areas that we couldn't address in that initial rollout was dentures. Dentures and home visits. A lot of our elderly adults don't have the capacity to go to a dental office. So we have a lot of dentists that actually come and do home visits, or they do visits in like assisted living facilities. And right now Medicaid doesn't actually reimburse for those visits, and they don't reimburse for dentures. So we're studying that to try and figure out how we can roll that out. We also had, again, with the expansion of adult dental, we need more providers. And also one of the things that we need is multilingual providers, especially in our rural communities. So we put in a bill this year that expanded what's called limited licensure. And limited licensure is fully trained dentists, but it means that they were internationally trained. And then there's a long pathway once they come to Maryland. They still have to do 2 years with a dental residency, and then if they are on the limited licensure, that means that they have committed to 2 years working in a public health space, in one of our federally qualified health centers or another public health space. So it's a way to attract internationally trained dentists to come and live and work and provide services here in Maryland. And that bill was actually a bipartisan bill. My Senate partner on that bill was Senator McKay, who was formerly in the House with me. He represents Western Maryland, and he used to call himself the dental delegate, and now he's happy to call himself Senator Smiles. I don't have anything nearly as cute. So in terms, I wish I did. We also did a bill that was brought to me by the Board of Dental Examiners, and it was on dental infections in dental offices. Now, this isn't because we have like a high rate of infection in Maryland. Actually, we've done really well with that. And anyone who's operating within the dental space is operating under their licensure, and everyone is part of dental infection controls. The reason that we had this bill is because it's not about the service. It's not about what's called the wet finger, where you are working with a patient. It's about the facility itself. If you have multiple people working within a single dental office, and for instance, there's something wrong with the pipes, there's something wrong with the equipment, who's responsible for that? And so this bill just creates sort of a point of contact. And there was a lot of resistance when we first did this. Our dental service organizations were really nervous. There are providers that work in that Medicaid space. And when we said, well, the reason that we have this bill is because without it, everyone is drawn into an investigation instead of having one point of contact to very expeditiously address any concerns. So we worked with all the stakeholders. We actually amended the bill to something that everybody was comfortable with, and then it passed unanimously in both chambers. So I was really proud of that because we did a lot of work to get everybody to the table and everybody in agreement. In terms of the mental health space, there's a couple bills that I did. One I did with Senator Guile. It was actually her bill, and she graciously asked me to cross-file it. And that was, so every county has a mental health advisory committee. And what we don't have is a requirement to have somebody with experience with mental health care for veterans specifically, like either somebody who has lived experience or a provider that works with the veteran population. Anyone who works in the mental health space knows that our veteran population have a high rate of PTSD, a high rate of suicidal ideation, but they're also a very hard population for services. The VA does not have services baked within the VA. They have to outsource those services. And a lot of veterans and active duty military do not like to work with providers who do not share lived experience. A lot of those veteran services are peer-to-peer services. So we had in a bill that establishes a member of every commission in every county to have some sort of expertise, either as a veteran with lived experience navigating the mental health system, or a provider who is knowledgeable about working with veterans and navigating that system. And that's part of our 22 a day effort. There was another bill that was not mine, but was also a really important part of that effort. It was actually supported by the Veterans Caucus, and that was the 988 Trust Fund. You all know that we established a national number, National 988, which is similar to 911. It's suicide prevention. You call, you immediately get a provider, a live person provider for services, and it was created federally, but it was left up to the states how to implement it and how to fund it. Maryland was ahead of the game. We established a 988 trust fund 2 years ago. Then last year we put $12 million in for the first 4 years. But then we talked to our advocates and we said, now you have to figure out like a sustainable fund, a sustainable way. Now, what does the 988 Trust Fund actually get us? Well, what it gets us is call centers that have a 90% rate of answering. Because if you don't get a local call center within the first 2 rings, it goes to the closest out of state, but you won't necessarily have somebody who's right in your jurisdiction. The benchmark for national was 85%, so we're actually ahead of the curve. And we have currently 6 call centers, including 1 multilingual call center as well. So the bill that we put in established a fund. It's a service fee on your cell phone bill. It's 25 cents a month. It's $3 a year. It's $3 a year to save a life. And so that bill, it did not pass unanimously, but it passed bipartisan and very nearly unanimously, because it's an incredibly small price to pay for an incredible return. We have, and the other thing about the call centers is that you can call, you can text, and you can actually live stream as well. So, so it's really incredible that the amount. I didn't bring the numbers with me, but when we were talking about this on the floor, the rate of the increase since we rolled out the 988 number, it was 200% calls, but 600% texts. And by and large, the text messages are coming from Marylanders between the age of 10 and 18. So, so it's become a really important tool in preventing youth suicide and veteran suicide. So we were really proud of that. I also had a really important, incredibly in the weeds, wonky bill. So when we passed the Affordable Care Act, there was a requirement in the Affordable Care Act for parity between somatic health care and behavioral health care reimbursement. And Maryland, Maryland has the same requirements. They're federal requirements. All of our carriers have to offer parity between behavioral health and somatic care. The problem is that they do these reports. They send them to the Maryland Insurance Administration. The Maryland Insurance Administration reads through them. They tend to be word salad. And then they send them back. They do them again. They're word salad. By then, the time frame has gone out. It makes it very, very hard to enforce parity, to ensure that there is parity, and to enforce it. So we had a bill. It was a 35-page bill. The Maryland Insurance Administration had come in with one version. We came in with another version that was much more stringent, and we spent about 4 weeks coming to compromise. And in the end, again, it passed unanimously. All of the stakeholders were thrilled with where we landed, and it's going to mean that the MIA is going to be much more efficient in reviewing those reports. The carriers are actually going to be providing us the information that we need, and it means we're going to get better services for our Marylanders who are seeking behavioral health care. The last thing I'll mention in this space is residential treatment centers. So the challenge we have often with residential treatment centers and with the recovery community is they tend to be sort of for lack of a better term, the redheaded stepchild of the behavioral health space. They tend to be underfunded. They tend to be run by nonprofits. There's not a lot of oversight. And it's really hard in Maryland to establish a residential treatment center because our statute was really outdated. It used to be when we first had residential treatment centers, they were essentially tied to a hospital. So the hospital was the certification arm for the residential treatment center. Well, since then, since privatization of hospitals nationally, but also in Maryland, where we are limited on our psych hospitals, but we have a nonprofit hospital system, so they're not by and large state run. There are a number of different accreditation organizations that accredit, do accreditation specifically for residential treatment centers. So in Maryland, if you had this accreditation, you still had to get an accreditation through the hospital system. So we streamlined that to attract more residential treatment centers, and we already have 2 residential treatment centers from out of state that want to set up shop in Maryland. So it's going to streamline the process, it's going to make it easier, and it's going to attract residential treatment centers so we can get folks into help much faster and more efficiently. And I'm going to mention one more bill that was not my bill, but my fingerprints are all over it. And you've heard me talk about this one before, because last year we had the assisted outpatient treatment bill, which had languished for years and years and years, over 2 decades. And my chair of the delegation, my chair of Health and Government Operations, created a work group. She made me the head of the work group, and she said, this was like the day after crossover, and we had from crossover to sine die to get a bill. And 25 stakeholders who opposed it, supported it, wanted it to be more, wanted it to be less. And we spent weeks and weeks and weeks working on this bill, and we got an incredible compromise in the bill. Now, assisted outpatient treatment is essentially, it's court-ordered community treatment for behavioral health. And essentially, the bill as it came in was enabling legislation, which made everyone nervous. Now, I will tell you, Maryland is one of only 3 states that do not have an assisted outpatient treatment program. So we worked with stakeholders, and we created a framework that ensured that we were protecting people's rights, but also that we were creating a minimum standard of care. That we were creating a court process that protected people, gave them the same protections, whether it was a civil or criminal process. And the reason that's important is because it also guaranteed that they would have representation. Normally in a civil process, which is what like an emergency petition is, you don't have a right to a lawyer. But we made sure that they would have access to the Office of the Public Defender. So that bill passed the House last year. It did not pass the Senate. Now, to be fair, it got to the Senate on sine die. Don't judge them.
Which is the last day of session.
It's the last day of session. So they didn't have a lot of time to digest it. But the governor took the bill this year. And the governor also brought resources to bear. And instead of it being something that the counties could opt to do, which is what our bill had been, it actually is now mandatory, and the counties, if they opt out, if some of our smaller counties were concerned that they wouldn't have the resources that the health department will step in and make sure that every jurisdiction has an assisted outpatient treatment. Now, who is this for? This is for those folks who, for whatever reason, cannot manage their own care, and they're cycling through the emergency departments, homelessness, and morgues. And we want to get them out of the criminal justice system, out of the jails, out of the emergency rooms, and into care. And so it passed the House very early on, so we gave the Senate lots of time to get comfortable with it, and it passed the Senate, and for the first time in 24 years, we will be establishing an assisted outpatient treatment program for the state of Maryland. So I was really, really proud of that. Couple other things. Top line, we talked a little bit about the juvenile reform bill. The one point I want to make, because I think it's really relevant and important to this community, is that previously those interventions, the SINS interventions, were not mandatory. They were voluntary, and that was the biggest challenge that we had. If there was a referral made, and the family simply said, we don't want to do it, we didn't have a way to enforce it. So that's really the biggest change, because when we're talking about those vehicle thefts, I think that was a really big concern for this community, is that how do we hold these kids accountable without giving them a criminal record, without them like having this terrible decision that they made in their youth follow them for the rest of their lives. So that was a big change from the bill that we did previously 2 years ago, is that now those referrals are mandatory. Those services, those wraparound services, those diversionary programs, they're mandatory now. So that gives us enforcement powers. And it also holds the Department of Juvenile Services accountable.
Do you want to comment on some other topics that?
Yes, thank you. The couple things that are non-legislative, but still really important. One of the things that we had several bills that came in from the Liquor Board, from the Anne Arundel County Liquor Board. We only passed one this year. I think we had 5 that initially came in. They only came into the Senate. And when we got them in the House, there were some concerns. We talked with the Liquor Board, and what we identified is that there's a little bit of a disconnect. We got some reports of maybe some overzealous inspectors. We also didn't have a lot of information about changing fees and why we were doing that, where that money was going. So we're actually establishing a work group this summer. Again, we love my chair loves to give homework, so we have followed suit as delegation chairs. So we actually are creating a stakeholders group with the Senate, the House, the county, and the Liquor Board reaching out to our restaurants and our retailers to try and get some feedback so we can figure out a better process. We think this is just a case of, we do it this way because we've always done it this way, and it's not working. So we're gonna use this as a teaching moment and make sure that we're doing things better. I also wanted to mention, reiterate, Bo touched on it, that the primaries are coming up, May 2nd through 9th. We have early voting here in the Broadneck Library. The primary day is May 14th. But it's really important that we utilize this opportunity with the early voting center. As you know, previously our early voting center has been Severna Park Library. That was our closest, really not terribly close for this peninsula. But that is actually moving to Early Heights Fire Station this year, which logistically makes a lot of sense. But for the peninsula, it essentially risked disenfranchising about 48,000 voters. So working with the Broadneck Council of Communities, working with my Senate partners and my colleagues in the House, we actually lobbied the Board of Elections and went and said, it's 48,000, it's 60,000 people, 48,000 voters from the western shore of the Bay Bridge to Route 2, to the southern end of Route 2. And so we aggressively lobbied for the Broadneck Library. We got the county council actually approved, the county executive made the request, the county council approved adding an additional early voting site. I mention it because I fear that if we don't use it, we'll lose it. I was able to use the census data from 2020 when this district was so aggressively responsive that you could actually see it on a heat map. I was so proud. And I said, like, this is the community that we're talking about. We were able to take the data from the 2022 elections where we said, this is the voter turnout. Like this is the turnout that we're risking disenfranchising. But I want to make sure that we're utilizing that resource so that I can keep lobbying for you and make sure that we keep that resource here in the Broadneck Peninsula. And I'll mention one other thing. Senator Gall touched on it, but we were able to get the funding for Whitehall. Now, why is that important? Because right now Whitehall is susceptible to the elements. So we need to make that building watertight. It's one of our last plantations on the Broadneck Peninsula. We did the same thing with Goshen Farm a few years ago. So we want to be able to make that facility watertight to buy ourselves time, because we know there are a lot of competing interests right now around that area. We've got the Holly Beach Farm that DNR has just acquired, and we know that there's some that Whitehall is under consideration for the Chesapeake National Recreation Area. Also, I think they've made a pitch with the Gateways program. And so we want to make sure that whatever happens with that beautiful, beautiful plantation and that beautiful land and that gorgeous building, which is unique to our peninsula, that we're preserving it so we can figure out, the next steps, and so that we have time for the community to have input as to what we're going to do. But if we don't shore up that building, again, we'll lose it. So we advocated to make sure that we got the full funding so that we could fix the roof, we could make it watertight, we could buy ourselves some time. And with that, I will open it up for questions.
So real quick, why don't we take some questions on the state issues and allow Amanda to plug in and
Oh, gosh,
make sure
yes,
that
thank
she
you.
can
I even wrote it
screen
here.
working and all. And we'll take some state level issues at this time, and then we'll turn it over to Amanda after some questions.
And I also want to just acknowledge that my Chief of Staff, Rory, is here, as well as my Legislative Director, Eli, our intern, who did incredible research for us. Shub is they're all here tonight as well. And I also have end of session letter at the back. So I saw a hand. Yes.
I just have a couple questions, and it's not questioning the program, sounds like you guys have met a lot of needs that need to be met. But I think aren't service taxes also going into place now?
I'm sorry, say again?
Taxes on a lot of services.
No, that did not pass.
No, that was when the two chambers came together. If I had to read the tea leaves, because that wasn't my bill, but if I had to read the tea leaves, I think that was a challenge to make sure that we got all the players to the table.
Are property taxes being impacted?
Right.
No, because the property taxes are county.
I don't know what all's in
No.
the budget, but like, do you guys look at, I would imagine there's programs or things that were going on that are no longer needed. Is that looked at to reduce efficiencies? Because I would imagine as time goes on, some of them be outdated.
Well, and that's a great point. And I think this year the overarching theme of this session was, where can we save? What can we do better? Where are inefficiencies? In fact, we had a bill in Health and Government Operations that's looking at all of our commissions to see if there's overlap or inefficiencies there. And part of that work is also to prepare us for what's called the AHEAD model. So in Maryland, we have a total cost of care. We actually have a really good health model. We have what's called a global budget, which means that all of our charity care is shared amongst our hospitals, which stabilizes our hospitals. It means that there's no patient dumping. You don't go like, this is the one hospital that'll take uninsured people. No, that cost is shared amongst all of our hospitals. It also helps stabilize them. And there's the total cost of care, which is like, how much does it cost to keep our population healthy? Well, the feds passed something called the AHEAD model, and Maryland was already ahead because it's basically the total cost of care. So part of that transition to the AHEAD model was also looking at those inefficiencies, looking at do we need all these commissions? Is there something that can be combined or reconsidered? And we have a behavioral, a public health commission that, and we also have like a public health advisory commission. And so we were looking at like, okay, where's the overlap there? And some of the work that was already done on that framework is now being used for the AHEAD model. So there was a lot of that work this year. But I think you're right. I think some of the challenge that we had, even when we were understaffed, is that there wasn't capacity to do some of that work. And within the state agencies, because the governor is in charge of the state agencies, often we're getting advice from them, we are advising them, but we are not like their employers. So we have had a real opportunity because we have a governor who also took very seriously looking at every state agency and how they're operating. If there's ways we can do it better, and if there are programs that are obsolete. We had one bill this year where we realized that okay, I'm gonna say it and I'm gonna giggle, but natural membrane condoms were criminalized. They were in our criminal code. Now, I'm sure that it was probably it was in response to the AIDS crisis. It was passed in 2002, but we were like, what? Why? Why is that there? And it's because natural membrane condoms, they don't prevent STIs. So I'm sure that's why that was there, but it doesn't belong in the criminal code. It belongs in the health code.
Just because, the cost of living has gone up for everybody.
Yeah.
So that's why I was asking.
No, and it's a great point, and I think we often have to look at, we can't look at legislation in silo, and we can't look at the budget in silo. And that's why, I think that's why there's so much value in the fact that we came to the table. We made a compromise on this session, but also a commitment to keep doing that work, because that work can't happen in 90 days. It has to happen in the months leading up.
Thank you.
Take another, Pat, you have a question?
Yes, can you tell us how much money you got for Whitehall?
Sure, it's 393,000, yeah.
Take one or two more questions, and we'll turn it over to Amanda for anybody else with a question for the senator or the delegate at the moment? You have one over here? Oh, okay. No?
So you mentioned earlier about the electric vehicle, like added fees and stuff, and that's like supposed to go into the transportation trust fund. Is that going to cover the cost for us to not see like drastic commuter bus like cutbacks, or is that not?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think you're referring to the commuter buses that they're looking at the MTA's proposed cuts to. I've heard a lot of frustration from different constituents about that issue that rely upon. I mean, we want people to use public transportation, right? I mean, like, this helps keep less people on the roads. It cuts back on traffic congestion, and ultimately, there's less wear and tear on our highways, on our roads. It's important. I know that we've voiced our concerns to MTA about those proposed cuts and communicated to them that asked them to look back at their data, because what they have said is that ridership is down and that they needed to cut them for those reasons. But my understanding from hearing from various constituents is that the way that they're calculating that data based on ridership, that they're relying upon incorrect data or something, and that's the best way I can communicate it. Hopefully, that our continued pressure with them will allow them to reconsider that. My understanding, though, as we're looking at also in the transportation fund, a lot of things on the highway repairs, things we are doing in the state as far as those MDOT type improvements and SHA type improvements. So I think those two things may be a little bit mutually exclusive, but overall, as we were looking at the budget, I do think that there's crossover there. I mean, ultimately, there's going to be budget challenges, and we are going to have to. I do think that we have to look at things about what are the things that are being used and what are the things we can cut. But I know that from hearing from constituents, and they're like, "Hey, we do use that, and that is an important service." So we'll continue to work with MTA and advocate for those that have expressed those concerns and frustrations. So.
Any additional questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to the county things. We'll have some time at the end for additional questions also.
Did I tell you?
Otherwise, Councilman Fiedler?
Oh, do we want to move the?
No.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I appreciate you all coming out this evening. Thank you to the senator and delegate for running through the state legislative work. Thank you to the Broad Neck Council of Communities for inviting me out here tonight to talk about the fun topic of the evening, land use comprehensive rezoning. So before I move on to the next slide, the county for comprehensive rezoning is broken into 9 regions. The way that the county executive and Office of Planning and Zoning has set up how we will move through each of those 9 regions is grouping them together in 3s. And each group of 3 will take about 2 years to get through. So we are in the first batch of 3 regions that are going through comprehensive rezoning. We are Region 4, which is the Lakeshore Pasadena area, and obviously District 5. We have been through the steps leading up to this point that I'll get to, and now we're in the thick of it. Region 6 was also introduced. We've almost worked through all of that. And Region 6 is down in this area, and then Region 2 is up in the northern part of the county. We will be voting on that legislation in early May. So just a little bit of background on how we got here. The state requires every jurisdiction in the state of Maryland to update their development plans and long-term plans for every jurisdiction. The state law is 10 years. Anne Arundel County, several councils ago, changed our code. We have to do it every 8 years. Well, then we were supposed to do it again in 2021, because the last time it was done was 2011, and we all know how challenging it was to do anything in 2021. Anne Arundel County is, hold on, I read that part. Let me move along. Okay, so I'm a very visual person. And it's hard to explain this without showing how we got here. So back in 2021, the county executive introduced a 2-book document, multiple pages. It's called the General Development Plan. That lays out the very high level land use all across the county. There's a lot of text in those documents on how we want to preserve natural features, how we want to invest in infrastructure, but what got us to rezoning is really the land use. And those are the categories identified at the top. Those are the land use categories that we voted on in Bill 1121. That then kicked off every region plan in that order of 3s to then review the zoning. So now we have the land use categories assigned. Now we're looking at the zoning. And in each different zoning category, which is associated to its land use, you have different levels of intensity, starting with the highest, which on this spreadsheet is the lowest intensity, moving to the bottom, which is the highest intensity for that district, that zoning district. The one exception is the other category. These are kind of standalones on their own. So as the council reviews Bill 2724 and Bill 2824 that pertains to our area, Bill 2724 is all of the documentations for properties that was passed in that general development plan and their land use. So that's in that top bill. In Bill 2824 are the zoning proposals for the county in our area. If the county council proposes any amendments to the zones at the bottom, we must also amend the land use bill on the top, because our land use should match our zoning categories. So comprehensive rezoning, what has been done up until this point? Well, you might have heard of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee that met
for, I believe, 18 months. It was a very, very long process. Was it 18 or 2 years?
It's just shy of 2 years.
Just shy of 2 years. Mr. Breeden was one of the appointed members of that committee. They met during COVID and kicked us into gear. Many, many meetings. They were the guinea pigs. We're going to change how we do it moving forward to make it a little more brief for future regions. But they met and reviewed every zoning application. They heard public testimony, and then they made final recommendations. Then the same applications went to the Planning Advisory Board. The same process happened there. The Planning Advisory Board is a board of 7 members, each appointed by their respective council member, but confirmed by the county executive. And then we are now at the bill introduction, Bill 27 and 28. The County Council will hold our first public hearing on these bills on May 20th. The bills were introduced on April 15th. The council is required to allow for a certain period of advertising, so that's why we're holding that meeting on the 20th. Amendments will be introduced. I'm already working on some amendments. But amendments aren't a bad word. Amendments don't mean that you're going to see sneaky upzoning happening. I have amendments that are retaining existing zones. I have amendments that are going to propose a different zone than what was even requested. So just don't be scared of that word. So the number of proposed changes for our area. There are 46 owner or owner representative applications. 71 proposed changes came from the county, 2 from the Planning Advisory Board, and 1,354 consistency changes from county staff. So what is a consistency change? Our county used to have to follow the zoning paper maps, and then as we evolved, we uploaded into computer maps, and technology has gotten better and better. Well, as you marry the old technology with the new technology, sometimes the colors on the maps don't line up with the parcel lines. What I mean by that is we have zoning categories color coded, and you would have the pink color going outside of the pink line. And our planning and zoning staff, they like to color by numbers. They don't like when the lines don't match up. So these are, the majority of them are under 1 acre, 1,125 or under 1 acre. I don't have a lot of concern about those because you can't do a ton of development with 1 acre. And those are those small map changes. And then 229 are over 1 acre. And I am working through those one at a time, taking a close look. So I wanted to give an example of a consistency change. This is in the Bay Hills area. We're going to talk about this triangular property here. That is the satellite imagery. You can see it's an already developed community. The existing zoning, this property owner has a corner that is marked open space, which really was meant to be part of the golf club property. So the proposed consistency changes that little triangle to yellow to match their existing residential zoning. I don't have a problem with that. This I have concerns over. Okay, so this is Severna Park. This is the heart of Severna Park. This is not a consistency change. It is a recommended zoning change by the Office of Planning and Zoning. On the left-hand side, that is the existing zoning. It's in red, which seems pretty aggressive for this conversation, but it is the existing zoning. What is recommended is the mixed commercial for that area. Now, 2 of the property owners have already reached out to me, and they do not want to be upzoned. It's just for financial reasons, for their feelings on what the area should look and feel like. So I am automatically taking them out. If a property owner does not want their zoning changed, you got it. I have concerns about the rest of the area because I haven't heard from the property owners, and I don't know that there is a need at this point in time. When you go to mixed-use zoning, there are small changes in what you can do on a property. So in C3 zoning, you can have a mix of residential and commercial. I believe it's up to 50% floor space has to be commercial. Mixed use commercial is dictated by a percentage of residential, commercial, office space, and has the potential, but is not required, for some industrial activity. So you can do a little more with that zone, and that just gives me some pause. I have put this out to the community because this did not go through the process with an application, and I'm looking for feedback. I'm getting a considerable amount of feedback from residents in Severna Park. So amendments. Years ago, 2011, amendments were coming in the last possible evening, and no one in the community, in the public, knew about them. Not a whole ton, but enough to make change without the community knowing about it. So after that, that rezoning happened, that comp rezoning happened, one of the council members introduced a resolution for a charter amendment. The charter amendment is basically our county constitution. And a resolution to change it means that if the council supports that resolution, it goes before the voters. And it did go before the voters. And the resolution to change the charter said that any amendments to the comprehensive rezoning legislation had to have notification. Didn't say how, didn't say where, didn't say how long, just notification. So it was incumbent upon our council to interpret that, come up with a plan, and then codify the plan. So we talked about a variety of ways to share to the public any amendments. It could have been a simple posting on our website. It could have been a mailed document to people within a radius of that property. It could have been a variety of other things. But what we settled on was a public notice sign. Those are the big white signs that you typically see when a property is going for a variance. It's big black letters, some red at the top, but it's notifying the public. We settled on finally 10 days. So an amendment, in some cases, will be required to have a sign posted on the property for 10 days. The sign has to be certified. There has to be evidence that the sign was posted for 10 days before the council will hear the amendment. So there is a more public process to this. I will also show you when I get to the county council website, I'll show you how you can see those amendments before they're even introduced, which is unlike any other legislation we do. Usually amendments come in at night on standard bills. We vote on them, they're gone. You can look at amendments in advance and plan on testifying. So a sign is needed if any amendment to change a property zoning who did not go through this process, if they have applied. I have to make a note that the way that this is happening right now and will continue to happen through the rezoning process is an individual can go onto the county council website, click file an application for Region 4 rezoning. They fill out all the stuff, and then our staff sends it to the council member who represents the area. That council member can say yes or no. And if the council member says no, it is then floated out to the rest of the council to see if anybody has any interest in pursuing that. I have said no to one already. I have not gotten any more, but I'm sure I will. And that is how that process will work. Also, you will need a sign if any amendment is proposed that is suggesting a different zone than what the applicant originally applied for and what the final recommendation was in the bill. I like to think of those as compromise amendments. If the community comes out and is really upset about what the final recommendation was, and the property owner's upset because they didn't get what they want either, and then you come up with a compromise and it's something different in between the two, possibly. No sign is needed if the council is retaining the existing zoning, because it is an enormous lift for our staff to produce these signs. And with 1,360 some consistency changes, if I decided I wasn't comfortable with 100 of them, that's 100 signs that our staff has to produce. So we got rid of that because it made sense. All right, so let's review the mapping tool. I'm gonna sit down because this is easier to do it this way. All right. bear with me here. Okay, so this is the County Council website. And you can go to this tab here if you want to review amendments before they are actually proposed and heard. Let me get to this. I know it is really small font, but I'm going to zoom in. I apologize, it's a computer. So if you look at this center section here, these are not for our area. We don't have any amendments for our area yet. But this, I'm going to stand up to point to this. This was Mr. Smith's area. He had to have a sign for all of these properties in the middle because existing was R1, proposed was R5, and he heard from residents in his community that they didn't want R5. Even the property owners didn't want R5. So he had to have signs for all of those for R1. You can see the district. You can see this is if a sign is required, yes or no. And then over here is when the potential amendment will be introduced and by whom. All right. This is, if you're looking for this, it is, if you Google Anne Arundel County Council, click on the Learn More tab at the top of the page, and that will take you to that chart. Now, if you want to learn, now I have to go to the, bear with me here. Thought I had this pulled up. Oh, you know what? I know where I can get it. All right, departments at the top of that county council page. If you click on departments, we're going to go to planning and zoning. And then we are going to go to the hub site. And we want to go to Region 4.
We can email this all out to everybody too, just for links directly.
Yes. So I talked about comprehensive consistency changes, and I talked about just comprehensive zoning changes. This link right here will take you to the list of properties in Region 4 that are under review, and OPZ, Office of Planning and Zoning, was kind enough to categorize them by area. So you have Gibson Island here, Pasadena. I'm going to scroll so you can just get a feel for it. Going to get to our region and then show you how you can, I apologize, it's quite a long document. And these are the ones that are a mix of owner applications and some changes proposed by the county Office of Planning and Zoning. Pasadena is very busy. Okay, we're in Severna Park. So when you look at these charts, you'll see in the first column, it's just given a code, the center three letters, SVP, Severna Park, the address, some miscellaneous information, but this is the acreage, what the property is now, that it is an owner application in this column right here, what they are requesting, what, I believe that's the SAC's column, what the stakeholder advisory committee recommended, that they agree with OPZ or disagree. Then you have what the Planning Advisory Board recommended, what the final recommendation was, and then some details of explanation. So for this one, I want to go to the map. I'm going to pull up that property that I showed you, the consistency change one with that little corner. You can pull any of the numbers, those coded numbers. if you see a property in that list, write down that code that I showed you, that CZ code, before you go to this map. So you click on the web viewer, agree to sign your life away. No, you're not signing your life away.
Not after Dawn'sville.
Yes, she saved us. Looking for a specific property, you would go over here and type in the address. That particular one was 636 Bay Green in Arnold. Click on it. It will take you there. So I'm going to zoom in. You can see the triangular property here. Over on the side, there are tools that will help you switch back and forth between what the current zoning is and what the proposal is. So that all of these eyeballs at the top, you really want to have those on so that you don't get lost in a sea of satellite imagery. It's helpful to have all of the parcels lit up. But I'm going to turn off proposed zoning, and I'm going to turn on existing zoning. And you'll see that inconsistency that I showed you in the document. And then I can turn off the existing and turn on proposed, and now I can see the difference.
And the little hash marks show the change area.
Yes, so the hash marks are how OPZ has flagged the consistency changes. So I want to talk to you about another property. This is another example of, and this is actually an amendment I'm working on, of a property that Planning and Zoning has recommended, even though there was no application. But then a neighbor put in an application for a commercial level change in zoning, and I'll show you what happened here. Come on. All right. You all are familiar with the Park and Ride off of, thank you, Jones Station. All right. So right here, let me turn off this proposed. Here is the corner Park and Ride area. Obviously, the B&A Trail is right here. There is a home here and a home here. It's an oddly situated lot line. But this property owner, can you all see my cursor? Okay. That property owner is currently zoned R5. The property owner requested C1. The property is already a small business. It's a house, but it's a business being run inside. The Planning Advisory Board recommended to retain R5. And then the county came back and said, no, they should be R10.
What?
Yes. Is there such a thing? Oh, yes. Yes, we go all the way to R22. So I'm working on an amendment that would put this property, this property owner here who has a very small business, into that small business category and would retain R5 on the other properties. So just so you can see what this looks like on the map with the colors, I actually have way too much fun with this. That is what it looks like presently, and that is what the proposal looks like. You notice you don't see this color anywhere close in proximity to that property. So these are just some examples of how you can go through and take a look and see what your neighbors are doing, see what your neighbors are proposing. Here are the consistency changes. Hold on, this might take a second to pop up. This is a 179-page document. Again, the vast majority of these are less than an acre, but there are larger ones that I'm making sure we're not doing something unintended, or a property owner might have a split zone property for a very specific reason and may not want the county coming in and color coding their property. So I'm looking at those, and I'm hoping that property owners are reaching out. I do want to say, and I'll go back to one of my slides, I forgot to point something out that I wanted to make sure I referenced. So there are going to be, in this process, really tough debates on certain properties, especially those ones where you have the PAB has one recommendation. There's a different recommendation from Office of Planning and Zoning, and the homeowner wants something different. That's where the county council really has to become judge and jury and look at the whole process, all of the recommendations during the process, and then go back and look at the map and make our best choice based on, you know, what we think as elected council members. But the Maritime District here, MA1B I highlighted because that is a brand new zoning district. It was a bill that I passed a few months ago. It's the first new zoning district that we have had in several decades. And that came from a proposed application by Mill Creek Marina from a property owner who has an existing small, very small marina, but could not ask for MA1 because those are only marinas that are part of homeowners associations where it's like a members only situation. But MA2, the next option at that time, allows for restaurants, boating fuel stations, lodging, and Mill Creek Marina is situated in a very small community, very small, narrow roads. And I thought, well, gosh, they don't fit in either of those. So I created MA1B, which essentially allows a pier rental business up to 15 slips. It allows for a smaller caretaker's residence, and that is about it. So there's no real commercial activity, and it really will be a solution for some of the smaller marinas from back when this area was just a seasonal area and folks were using their properties for small marina businesses. That has since changed, but not every property has become purely residential. So you do have some small marinas that are operating as a non-conforming use. And when they get to the point of wanting to do some changes on their property, they run into legal issues because you can only change a certain percent of your property if you are operating under a non-conforming use. So this gives them a home to land, but they don't automatically land there. They have to go through the application process. And in this particular situation, this property owner will have to post a sign on their property and saying that they no longer are requesting MA2 and that they are requesting MA1B. And I think that kind of wraps up the high level stuff.
On this?
Yeah.
Do you want to comment on BMX and things?
Oh, yes. So there are a few issues, not issues, but topics I wanted to make sure I addressed as well. We will be hearing comprehensive rezoning through July. That is when the bill dies, and we are going to be busy. We've already had several meetings run to midnight, until midnight. We cannot vote on bills after midnight, but we can hear testimony and vote on resolutions. So from now till July, we'll be doing this for our area. On May 1st, the county executive is introducing his fiscal year 2025 budget. And that kicks off with a lot of hearings from county departments. We'll hear the tax rate, both property and I'm losing my train of thought here, sorry. Both tax rates. We'll also hear from the county executive how he's going to fund different categories. We have schools, fire, police. These are really critical. Library. We have really critical infrastructure needs as well. So stay tuned. But I'm going to live at the county council for the month of May and June. And then there have been two topics, one associated with comprehensive rezoning and one separate that I just want to touch on here. If you're on social media, you may have heard of a feedback requested from the community on the potential of a BMX park at Bay Head Park. That came from a very small request from the community of BMX families who have kids who are part of the BMX team at the high school and coming up through the younger ages. When it went to the county for consideration, somehow it took off running and the cart really got ahead of the horse. And what was proposed were 3 very large, complex-oriented proposals. The community obviously was very upset. I was very upset. And it's a very small road to get there. It's the access road, and those fields are currently used for athletics, youth athletics. And what was being proposed would have displaced hundreds of youth athletics, hundreds of kids, as well as parking for the theater. It's unfortunate that it went that direction, but the update to that is that after reviewing 700 and some comments, the Department of Recreation and Parks is not moving forward with anything. So I'm a little disappointed that we can't even consider the small suggestion at this point. Maybe we can try that again later, but at this junction, that is not moving forward at all. The second item I did want to discuss is the property for Spriggs Farm Park is in this document. You will see that there's R2 in there, and they're recommending R2, but that's because they're already R2, and their grant funding is associated with the value of the property. So if the county were to downzone, which the county has proposed to move them to OS, we would devalue the property and potentially lose the grant associated with it, and we don't want to do that because we want to preserve and protect Spriggs Farm. So I don't want anybody to misunderstand that we're recommending an upzone. It's a retention so that we can retain our grant funding. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Take some questions. Go ahead.
You mentioned this, and I see you're focused on it, is some split zoning on larger parcels, that if it was converted to single zoning, especially my concern is around headwaters and open space areas that are getting converted to R1 or R2 or whatever. And I guess my question is, by converting some of that open space into the residential space, does that offer the potential on larger parcels like 17 acres, 15 acres, whatever, of adding additional houses if that were developed as R?
I believe yes. It would depend on the individual property.
Yes, but yes.
Yes, and then, so you have to look at the size of the property first, and then you add on the layer of environmental regulations, critical area, if there's steep slopes, that starts to shrink the envelope for development.
But does the envelope start larger if it's all one, or is it strictly,
Yes.
you've got the overlays, but it's one less protection that you pulled out from under one of those overlays?
That is correct, yes, prior to adding in all of those. But I will tell you too that some property owners don't want that to happen, because anytime you increase the zone, there is a very high potential for a tax increase as well.
All right, well, you'll be hearing from us.
Doug.
Thank you. Is it possible to make these view graphs available? Is that what you offered earlier?
What's that? All the things you just showed?
Yeah.
We'll put together an email and email it back out. We have done so through our website already. There's some of the links there, along with obviously the county, and we have sent them out in previous newsletters, but we will certainly send back out again so everybody has access for commenting at this time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Steve?
Yes, my name's Steve Miller, and I also serve with Bo on the Stakeholders Advisory Commission.
I didn't see you there.
Councilwoman, as usual, you've done an extraordinary job with your research and also covering, I think, one of the key issues with this bill that's coming up. But I do want to say is that this was an exceptionally transparent and inclusive process. And more importantly, the stakeholders that were on this committee stayed pretty much the same. And when we had any gaps, they were quick to fill in with, I think, some people that were even better than the folks that started off with in the group. the OPZ people did an extraordinary job in trying to get the word out on this. And they did it through surveys, they did it through open forums, they met in the libraries with anybody that was willing to show up, and they did that on multiple occasions. So I really don't have anything at all negative to say about the process. OPZ went through all of these different applications that were submitted by homeowners, as well as the ones that they were recommending. They did not go through all the consistency changes, and I commend you if you were able to go through those 100 additional ones in there, because that is a real challenge. But let me say, we took a vote on all of this as a group. We were not unanimous in anything. A lot of discussion, because we had people representing all the different communities that were shown there at the beginning of the slide. We tried to be as consistent as possible, not just looking at Severna Park or taking a look at Arnold or any of the others. We tried to look across the county, be as consistent as we could with the decisions that we're making. So this is the final stopgap right here, and it is exactly the right process. Ultimately, we added a vote, but that vote is not the same as a vote that comes from an elected official. And so she's got a tough job, and I'm sure that all of the stakeholders that were part of that committee would say this is the right way it's supposed to be done.
And thank you, Mr. Miller, for your service, and Mr. Breeden. That was a long 2 years.
Question over here.
Yep. On the residential zoning classifications, could you speak, well, I have two questions. Number one, could you speak on permitted use, conditional use, and special exception, and what's allowed in a special exception in a residential zoning, like maybe a possible commercial use, which becomes the camel's nose under the tent for then somebody say, well, I had a special exception for 10 years,
Yeah.
why can't I go to commercial zoning?
Do you care if I?
Can I email it to him?
Oh, yeah. I can give a high-level answer, and
Yep.
then you, okay, so it would be impossible for me to go through all of the different allowances, but I'll summarize.
Just examples.
Yes, so a permitted use, we have a use chart for every zoning category in the code. When you go to that chart, you have one for residential, one for commercial. You'll see permitted, which is permitted by right, it is allowed. Then you'll see conditional, which means that certain conditions have to be in play in order for that use to be on the property. Now, someone can certainly go through a variance and challenge that, but conditional uses are conditioned. And then special exception uses are ones that you have to go to the hearing officer for to get approval on. That is a high level of proof and burden on the landowner to prove that they should be able to do what they want to do in the special exception category.
My other question.
Yeah.
David Taylor. I served on the David Taylor redevelopment advisory committee when Kathy Vitale had your seat.
Yep.
And Janet Owens was in office, county executive, and Annapolis Partners, they got the land, they got their zoning, I think it was government reuse, facility zoning, got it laid to them on a silver platter, and then nothing happened. And I don't even know if Annapolis Partners is still around anymore.
There's a good article that just came out on it all.
My aide Pam Scarborough is in the back here. She's the major part of our office operations. She is very on top of that. I'll have her send you some stuff.
Okay.
And there's an article that came out.
But the basis of it is, it's still an active thing. There was a 25-year lease
Correct.
provided to JSC that this past year in federal government,
Joint Spectrum.
Joint Spectrum, yeah. And now they're being moved to Fort Meade based on federal funding, and that will free up the possibility for all that to occur sometime after 2025.
Yeah, Annapolis Partners was saying that the continued existence of Joint Spectrum there was putting a
That held everything up. Held it all up for 25 years.
Yep.
So, there's a question in the back.
Yeah, thank you. Can you speak to the 10 acres at Old Mill Bottom, 50, and Baydale? The 10-acre proposal, I understand it's going.
Shut down.
Oh, truth be.
Ferguson.
Ferguson or Ferguson?
Ferguson Road.
Okay, yes, I have seen it on the chart. I haven't gone through yet to review, although I saw snippets of the PAB. I need to review the PAB hearing and go through and look at that, but that's what I'll be doing between now and July. I don't have an amendment for it at our next meeting. I just haven't gotten that far down the list. But I did see it, yes.
I assume you would be open to hearing people's comments on.
I want everybody's comments. Yeah, so if you have pro or con on anything, send it my way. That's part of the public process that will also come into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Question here.
I want to change the topic. Annapolis has banned gas-powered leaf blowers. DC has, Montgomery County has. I would like Anne Arundel to ban them, or even better, a whole state. What do you guys think?
Can I say something real quick? So we actually had a bill to ban them in the whole state. Delegate Foley from Montgomery County had that bill. Montgomery County's banned them. I hate gas-powered leaf blowers. The noise, I think a lot of people now that are working from home, it's the sound is awful. It's bad for the worker. A lot of times they may not even be wearing ear protection. It's also, I think that the output, it's like a truck driving from Texas to Alaska for just that minimum time, the carbon production, they're just absolutely terrible. The problem is, as we in the state make laws for the entire state, we have to keep in mind some of the things that may work well here, may not necessarily work all that well in Garrett County or Allegheny County or in the Eastern Shore. Some of the things that we all live in close proximity to each other, I still think they're bad environmentally. Look, but some of the things that we do, we have to be mindful of that. So I actually spoke with Councilwoman Lisa Rodvian recently. I don't know if she intends to introduce something like that just here for the county, but I couldn't more add exclamation points behind everything that you're saying. I don't think, at least to ban them, I don't know if it's something that we can do as a statewide approach just yet, that I think we would rely upon the counties in order to make those decisions. And from hearing from various stakeholder inputs, we realize that various landscaping companies, the cost of transitioning everything they have from gas power to electric may prove challenging. So we may have to, figure out what other things we can do to help, encourage them to do so.
The other thing is, they go battery, they won't be able to do the lawns because you don't have enough power.
There are actually some really great technology. That's my understanding that has actually developed. That they're pretty they're pretty efficient. That as the technology has developed, because I thought the same thing too.
Battery has its limitations.
So,
absolutely.
one or two more questions. I'm going to give Pat 5 minutes. Kevin, go ahead.
With the zoning expert here, I was just curious what the status is of the hubbub surrounding the possible coming of a Chick-fil-A to the area south of the Arnold, and whether that is a thing or not a thing, because it's so much hubbub, and I just want to hear where it officially stands from someone that actually might really know something.
Okay, so.
Because it caused, much further on for and against, obviously.
Yes. So that, I would say that is why this process is so important, because the property is zoned C3, which you can, by code, put a Chick-fil-A there, because it is under the C3 use chart. But it is not part of this bill, this legislation. So the application, I believe, has been submitted to the county or is about to be submitted to the county. They've had their second pre-submittal meeting because they went through the process before and ended up running out of time. So they're starting the process all over again, but it is the Office of Planning and Zoning who is reviewing it and will make decisions on it. Those decisions are not made by the county council. We are tasked with creating the legislation that first zones the properties, updating the legislation that says what can be done on the properties within those zoning codes, and then when a property has a proposal for development, the county agencies are tasked with making sure the code is followed.
Thanks for a great answer.
Okay. I've never been called a zoning expert before.
Take this last question here, ma'am.
I have a concern over the Maryland Port Administration, and I think
you may recall helping me with my concern over the dredging and all that that's going on. And I think this bridge accident just brings it into focus, at least for me, in that I just think we need to be more concerned. Maybe a similar thing happening on the Bay Bridge, it's a little more fortified, I understand, but I just hope there's more oversight with the port activities. In that, it just seems like there's been this focus to build it. And the fact that the Key Bridge is considered an unimaginable accident scares me, because I don't think it was unimaginable. And I'm not criticizing it, may seem premature to bring this up, but, you know, I've expressed my concerns about the dredging and where that's going. That's Talbot County, Dorchester, and all that. And I just would like for more people to be aware of it. It's not affecting Anne Arundel, but clearly if something were to happen to the Bay Bridge, it would affect us. And I think, for example, what I'm hearing now is the consensus is that if there were tugboats required through that bridge, that would have mitigated the situation. I don't know what the situation is.
Yeah.
You know, I've read up on all these near misses. It's not unimaginable, that's for sure. And if they're bigger boats, somebody surely recognized the fact that there were bigger boats coming into the harbor.
Well, all the accident simulations and thought processes that led to the way the Key Bridge was designed was made with boats about a third of the size as the target.
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
The older calculations were used on older boats 50 years ago. That's what we have now in Hampton.
Oh, I know.
Do you want to
They have been updated.
that? Yeah, I don't know if a comment, I think Bo was trying to say the comment necessary.
Solve that coming?
Yeah.
My concern is
Closing
that.
comments?
Yeah.
Certainly recognized.
Sure.
But I'm not sure, just keeping an eye on everybody else. I just want more of
Yeah, and I mean, certainly, obviously, right now, their main goal is to, I think the report of opening up at least one channel today and be able to get commercial activity into the port. And I'm sure we could probably dissect lots of different ways of what could have been done and what, especially as we make plans for the future during the time of rebuilding of what are the, in light of how big those container ships are now that we are using unfortunately, I can't help but also just say that a lot of this was an accident. Thank God, that more people didn't die in the process of this. But that being said, I think a lot of lessons can be learned moving forward.
Well, there's a lot of money too, a lot of public money going in to support the port. I don't know how well known that is.
Well, and if I may just add on, it also raised the profile that this is a national concern, not just a Maryland concern. The port, the closing of the port, it had national implications on our commerce, on our supply chain, and when it happened. My first thought was to the workers that were on the bridge and to the port, but my second thought was to our bridge. As this community knows, the Bay Bridge right here, that we're in the shadow of the bridge, and we are in the middle of the Tier 2 study, which is going to, we're going to have the results of which in 2026. I was grateful to see that, President Biden, the first thing he said is we're going to pay for this. We're going to figure it out later, because I think if we didn't have a sympathetic executive, we might be looking at an even greater crisis where this was on the state dime, and so I think at all levels, at the state level and at the federal level, we're looking at how we can have greater oversight, what regulations we need to change, because to your point, when these bridges were built, the boats were much smaller, and even as we're looking at what we're going to, what we're going to how we're going to build capacity with the Bay Bridge, we have to recognize that the ships may get bigger as well, that they're bigger than they even were when that bridge was built. And so I take your point, and I will say that those conversations are happening right now with our governor and with our federal partners. So I think there will be action at both the federal and the state level to make sure that though we recognize this was an accident, there are lessons to be learned, and there are actions that we can take to prevent another accident.
I want to close the question and answer period at this time. I want to thank Councilwoman, Senator, and the delegate for coming out. I've given a round of applause. We will have, I'm going to give Pat presidential privilege and give her just a quick 5 minutes to go over a few topics that are just updates for the summer and and then we will close. I'll extend the time to meet and greet and chat with anybody, and we'll get out of here by about 9:30 at the latest. But Pat, 5 minutes.
Hi there. We have had very serious concerns over two of the properties on the Broadneck Peninsula, South Broadneck, and one is, you've already heard about Whitehall Estate. The other one is Holly Beach Farm. And that road, Holly Beach Farm Road, is of serious concern. Let me give you just a couple of bullets on that. Holly Beach Farm Road is a private road. It's about 2.5 miles long. That was selected by Stuart Pittman and the mayor of Annapolis, Buckley, for a beachfront for swimming and kayaking. And the Broadneck Council worked with him to finally, it was in What's Up Annapolis, if any of you read that article on it, and they were going to open up for public access. That is a private road. However, it's now in the hands of DNR as deeded over from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. So DNR has a lot of power, and we are going to meet with the person who's now the contact. They're moving into another direction. They have gotten 300 acres of property from Chesapeake Bay Foundation that they plan on doing something with. That person for what is going to happen, that's for DNR, is a guy by the name of Paul Ped. I talked to him this week, meet with us and give us a review of what their plans are to develop that 300 acres. And respect the fact that it is a private road and the fact that we are very concerned about public park. It's going to interfere with the traffic, beach traffic that's we live with every summer, and we're going to do whatever we can to fight it, quite frankly.
There's an entire advisory process to that we hope to be appointed on, and Paul has already said that he would like to appoint somebody from the Broadneck Council to work with them and other groups within the area. There will be a group of advisory citizens from the area. So if you're interested in that, we'll have more information as that is available. But that will help with scoping what has been a concern for everybody, that we work to limit traffic, travel, those sort of things. Use that. Broadneck Council has its own ideas. Maybe making it look a lot more like Jug Bay, and more of a sanctuary and more of an educational center to coordinate with schools. We'll get into that some other time. A testing center for DNR to design types of projects and formulate them on the bay and use that since it's out in the with a lot of wind and wave action. Communities like Cape St. Clair, who've done millions of dollars of restoration, would have been, does that work on that side or this side of the, right? And spending our money, we could also maybe coordinate with the state. So those are all things that are down the road, but we hope to have those conversations.
We have fought very hard to protect the Broadneck, and I also had John Sarbanes as a speaker 2 years ago when we ran a series of meetings here. I in Holland because we knew he was writing his legislation to turn the Whitehall Mansion into a CNRA site. I have issued at least 9 invitations, filling in the forms. I have never heard back from him. And yet he has stated publicly that he has consulted the community leaders in any actions he has taken to propagate this CNR idea and now ultimately pass the bill. We are furious. A meeting, I would like him to speak, and you all come and tell him what to do for the Broadneck Peninsula. One last thing, and that's just an interesting part of the development of Whitehall Estate. I work with Charlie Scarlett. He's the owner under the Brandywine Foundation. There are currently 3 activities going on, and I've lived here for over 50 years. I have never been up there. I didn't know what was going on, but they are giving tours. House tours, limited, managed. The house is a mess. It's a disgrace. He needs $1 million. We are now getting $383,000. So he's not going to be able to pay for his new roof. That will be at the top of his list. There are 3 things going on currently. They have limited house tours, believe it or not. We took one, and it's blinding to see the mess. They also have a bed and breakfast on that property, where they have a couple of rooms and they rent the B&B out for anybody who wants it. And then third, weddings. That's going on. Planned. Manage house tours by the National Park Service, kayaking, and ferry boat stops. Now, there are a lot of people activities that he's planning, but we're on top of it, and we'll be working to do whatever we can to be sure we have mitigated the issues that we're all concerned about, like traffic and noise, et cetera. Charlie has been very helpful, and he said he doesn't want any more traffic than we do, and he will manage these tasks and these events, okay? And that's it.
So just to clarify on that, Chesapeake National Recreational Area is still in the committees in Congress.
Just had
The hearing, but they had of 23, and so this Congress ends at the end of December, January timeframe due to elections. So it'll be interesting to see if they move it forward. Time there's find out about that by calling your senator or your representative, but we're following along on all those issues. The last one no one mentioned, and just want to make sure we say it here. You have a stoplight going in St. Margaret's and Whitehall Road. There's going to be a 4-way stoplight there. You're seeing all the infrastructure go in. Later this summer, you'll also see the infrastructure, State Highway at Pleasant Plains and Old Mill Bottom. John Joins has worked very hard for that for 10 years. Pleasant Plains and Old Mill Bottom and St. Margaret's Road will have a new stoplight before roughly beach season according. And then, of course, State Highway, which last year shut down the exits. This is very important to everybody. It was Thursday to Sunday last year. This year is Friday mornings to Saturday nights. They've taken the Thursdays and Sundays off, and they're only shutting down Oceanic on those days. And my understanding is exit 31.
31's permanently closed.
31 closed. 30 is the one right after Anglers and McDonald's and all. That one will be open, but going in there, and they're going to close 32 at Oceanic. So that's for Fridays and Saturdays. Different trial run of the trials they're trying, so we'll see how that works. We've had previous meetings about that. We will likely have additional meetings on that at the end of the season. We also hope to bring All Out and DNR when the time is. And we also would take other suggestions from the public. We hope you guys are following along on Facebook. Hope you're getting our emails. If you're not, please sign up in the back. Please join the Facebook page, the discussions, and look for more information from us here going forward. Okay, I'm going to, unless anybody else has anything else, we're going to adjourn the meeting. Have some snacks. Thank you. It's 9 o'clock.